Hey there everybody, welcome to the shop. Today I have a BMW F650GS and this bike needs fork seals. In this video I'm going to show you how to replace your fork seals on your GS.
You'll need some basic tools for this project. As they say in my neck of the woods, there are several ways to skin this cat, but these are the tools that I used for this job. You can find a comprehensive list along with links to purchase in the description below. Torque specs, part numbers, and other useful information can be found there as well. So how do you know if you need new fork seals? You're going to want to look for any sort of residue on the stanchion, that's the polished part. You can see here that there is a small amount of residue indicating that there is a pretty minor leak, but it's a good idea to go ahead and get out in front of the problem and go ahead and replace the inner and outer fork seals. If the fork seals are really bad, they can actually blow fork oil out onto the body of the fork. That can run down onto the brakes and ruin the brake pads or detrimentally affect stopping power. Also, it can detrimentally affect the handling characteristics of the motorcycle, so it's not something you want to let go.
First up, we're going to need to get the front in the air and get the front wheel off. There's several ways to do this. Obviously I'm using this pancake jack and a lift. These bikes usually have a center stand. This one does not. So if you do have a center stand, what you can do is put it on the center stand, lift the front of the bike, and put a jack stand up under the front. Just make sure it's safe and stable no matter what you do. First up, we're going to take off the speed sensor here, or ABS sensor. You'll need a 10mm socket for that. When you take this speed sensor out, there is a washer behind the sensor, so be careful not to lose that, and make sure you put it back in the same place when you put it back together. This wire is clipped right here, and you're going to gently pull that out. Try to not put too much tension on the wire. You can kind of use your thumb to push up on the clip. After the speed sensor, we're going to take these two bolts out that hold the brake caliper on. Nice, it removed itself. Once you got those bolts out of the caliper, we're going to just slip the brake line out of this bracket. Now that we've got the speed sensor and the brake caliper off, we're going to break this pinch bolt loose. You do not have to remove it all the way. You can just loosen it till it's just kind of hanging out in there. Now we're going to remove the axle. Might be a little tight, but no problem. Go ahead and put the elbow grease on it. Now that we've got the axle loose, we're going to apply a little bit of tension up here and kind of hold the wheel up, and then just work the axle out. There you go. The wheel has some spacers in it that may fall out. Don't worry about that. Just remember which side they go on. Now that we've got the front wheel off, we're going to take off this 13mm nut that holds the brake line bracket on. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Hasn't changed. Next up, we're going to remove the stabilizer bracket that bolts between the forks. Notice the rear bolts are a little longer. All right, now that we've got this bracket off, we're going to move up a little bit and take off the forks. Okay, now that we've got the front wheel off, the brake caliper, the speed sensor, and the stabilizing bracket between the forks, we're going to loosen these two pinch bolts on the lower clamps and this guy right here. We're going to take a 6mm Allen socket, break these loose. You don't need to take them out, just get them good and loose. I'm going to break this loose, and it probably won't fall out, but just in case, I'm going to grab it by the bottom here, just to make sure. Now that it's loose, we should be able to gently slide it out. There we go. Here's a fork. All right, got the fork on the bench. Let's change the seals. First up, before we take it apart, we are going to loosen this bolt on the bottom here that holds the dampening rod in. The reason we're doing it now is because it's still got spring tension in the fork, and the dampening rod is being held tight against the bottom of the fork body. Roll the fork over to where these, it's actually the brake caliper mounts are being pressed against my table. There you go. Now there is still oil in this, so you don't want to completely remove it. Sometimes these can be kind of a booger. Yeah, it feels like this one's just spinning, so we'll address that in a second. Next up, we're going to take this cap off. This cap, underneath this cap is a spacer, goes down to about right here, and then a spring. So it is under tension. It's not a crazy amount, but just keep that in mind. To get it off, you can leave it in the bike. If you've ever seen a bike where this hex flat is messed up, it's probably because they were trying to take it off with it still clamped in the triple clamp. Don't do that. I've got old Bessie here. She does me good. If you do use a vise, be gentle. Don't mess up your stanchions, but these are usually not too tight, and they'll just pop right off. And so now I've got my ratchet and I'm pressing down on the cap as I remove it, and there it goes. Cap is off. As I disassemble the forks, I'm going to lay out my parts in consecutive order, because it goes together properly one way. So on the last fork, these forks actually have little drain plugs on them right there, And on the last one, I used that. And I kind of thought that was kind of a faff. So on this one, I'm going to take the components out and then dump the oil out the top. So 1, 2. To get the spring out, I'll slide the stanchion down. And then there's the spring, and on top of the spring, there's a washer. Don't lose that. When you pull the spring out, it's definitely gonna make a mess, but nothing we can't handle with some shop towels. And then I'm just gonna tip it up and dump it out, and I'll actually actuate the fork. Okay, it looks like that's most of it. Try to stay relatively clean here. Now, we got to get this bolt out. I'm going to try it again with the ratchet, but the last one, it's a M6 hex socket here. Try again with this ratchet, but yeah, it's just spinning in there. That's not going to do it. So, I try to avoid doing this, but we're going to have to use the special tool. Zip it out. It's actually got some thread locker on it. Dadgum. That's a bummer. That's a big bummer. Yeah, it happened on the last one too. So, it's got thread locker in there on the dampening tube. And basically, I have to take it apart, dump out the oil, and then reassemble it. I suppose I gotta reassemble it to get spring tension back on it. It doesn't take a ton of time, it's not a huge deal. I suppose you could just pull it out and let the oil drain out the bottom there. Might do that next time. So when you're reassembling this, you want to press down on it, hold the stanchion. You don't want to mess these threads up. Snug this up. That'll hold just enough tension on this so we can zip it out with their impact. Yep, it's out. There we go. We are ready to take the dust seal off. You can use a screwdriver. Just got to be careful not to booger up the fork body, but I'm gonna try this little body panel removal tool, and I think it's gonna work pretty well. See, it's kind of wedged shaped, so you can get the front piece in and then roll it out like that. And man, that worked good. That might be my new go-to, honestly. But you can use a screwdriver if you're careful. just be sure and get one with a pretty thin blade. Now we're gonna, keeping our things in order here, we're gonna take our dust seal off, set it there. Now, if I can get this on camera, there is a snap ring down in the cast body of this fork. So we're going to need a pick, and you'll see that it's got some little indents that are designed for you to pull that out of the groove. Now the trick here, gonna take our 90-degree pick, pull this out, kind of hook out underneath it here, and then roll around the edge. Pops right out. These picks are usually sharp, so just be careful not to scratch the stanchion. Slide that off the top. Now we're going to slide hammer the old seal out. What I'm going to do is I got my pegboard set up here for my fork job. So what I like to do is use one of these pegs here, hang it up, and let it drain, just like my spring. Clean the dampening rod up, inspect it for any sort of crazy damage, gouges, or anything like that. Something to look at here, the steel washer that went underneath the seal here is corroded. So I'll take a piece of Scotch Brite and clean that up before I reassemble it. Got corrosion off of there. There we go. Good as new. Clean and inspect the bushings. You're looking for this Teflon coating around the inside of this guy. Perfect condition. Same for the outer diameter of this one. Perfect condition. If you start to see that that's getting worn through, it's time to replace the bushing. After we've got everything clean and inspected it to make sure nothing's bent, broken, scratched, scuffed, we're going to reassemble it. We're gonna get our lube, our grease. This is good waterproof grease here. Put a skosh on everything here that's gonna be getting new parts put on it. Just a film there. A film on our bushing here. Slide that guy on there. Next goes the washer. Grab my seals. New seals. You want to go with a reputable brand like SKF or OEM. And shocker, the BMW OEM parts are ridiculously expensive. And honestly, I think the SKF seals will be better anyway. So, with these, This kit actually comes with an extra spacer here. It came with some destructions as well, but this came with an extra spacer, and the reason is the fork seal is not exactly the same width. So what we'll do, add this little extra spacer. Once you've got your spacer on there, you need to determine for your use case if you're going to need that, but for this exact job we did. We're going to lube our seal up. Put a healthy amount of grease on the inside of the seal. We're going to take a piece of plastic here, push down over this, into this stanchion here, slide the seal over it. This is so we don't cut the seal. This stanchion's not super sharp right here, but some of them are. So be careful of that. Slide the seal down. Then we're going to stick our dampening rod, slide that down there. Make sure it comes out there rather. Now we're ready to reassemble the fork. Don't forget to clean out inside of the fork body itself, especially if your seals are really bad. You can get dirt and just generally other kinds of residue down in there, and I really don't like doing things twice, so you're better served doing it properly the first time. So typically what I like to do is take my towel and jam it down in there with, not too tight because you want to be able to get it out, but jam it down in there with an extension to clean the inner diameter of this piece here, and then take your air nozzle from an air compressor and blow the towel out. Once you've got this nice and cleaned up, we're going to stick this back on the dampening rod. You don't want to hold the stanchion vertically and just pop it in there, so I like to put them together like this. Push the stanchion to the bottom. Go ahead and take your bolt here, shake your Loctite up, put just a skosh after you've cleaned this bolt, and put a new lock washer on it. Put just a skosh of thread locker on it. And get that started. Sometimes you might need to hold the whole assembly upright to get it started. Feels like I've got it started though. Yep. And we'll finish torquing it once we get the assembly, the whole fork back together. Stand it up, put my seal driver on, lock it on, and then I'm gonna smack him in there until you see the relief where the retaining ring goes. Set that to the side. And it's gonna be impossible to tell on camera probably, but there's a little relief machined in there, and we'll pop our clip back in. These, if they're not too bad, I have seen these about to just rust in two, or I have seen them rust in two, really. If these aren't too bad, if it's got just a little bit of corrosion on it, you can clean it with the Scotch Brite as well. This one's actually pretty much perfect, so I'm just going to put it back in. Pop it down there, and you should just be able to get it started. Once it's started, you can use your pick, pop it in, and it'll snap down in place, and you're good to go. Do not scratch the stanchion with the pick. You're going to lube the inner diameter and the outer diameter of this dust seal. We're going to play it safe. Use our little special tool here again. And I'll typically stand my fork up and take and seat this out by hand. There we go. New seal's installed. We need to fill it up with oil, but remember that bolt on the bottom is not tight yet. So, a little bit of a faff. We're gonna have to temporarily reassemble it with the fork spring in it. Pull that up, put the spring in, put the washer in, put the spacer in, and lightly seat this out. Now that that spring tension is holding the dampening rod down, we should be able to snug this bolt up. All right. So, hate doing this. Ideally, we wouldn't have to, but we got to get this. There we go. Just gently get that started. What was happening is the dampening rod was just spinning in there. Do not torque it with that. Unless you're very confident in your ability to use your power tools. I was a professional mechanic for a long time, so I mean, I know that wrench really well, I know that impact really well, but it's dicey. I wouldn't suggest doing that. Okay, got that torqued. We didn't remove that this time. So now we're gonna remove the cap again, take the internals back out, and fill it with oil. We've got the seals in and the dampener rod bolt torqued. We are going to fill it back up with oil. The Dakar model takes 560 cc's of oil per fork leg. So just over half a liter. So I'm using my Ratio-rite here. If you ride a two-stroke, you've already got one of these. But it's just generally a handy tool to have. You can hear it gurgling it up. So we put 500 in. Gonna do another 60. All right. Once we got the oil in, we'll actuate it a few times just for peace of mind. Then I'm gonna pull the stanchion up a touch. If it wants to slide down, you can hold your thumb right here and it'll stay. Slide the fork spring in. And we're gonna not forget our washer. Pop that in there. Put our spacer in there. Wipe our hand off so we can do this. We're gonna start the cap. Careful not to cross thread that. There we go. New fork seals and new oil installed. Now that we've got new seals and fresh oil in here, we're just gonna reassemble it the reverse of how we took it apart. When you reinstall the forks, you want the cap to be flush with the top surface of the fork bridge. Once you've got the fork set to the proper height, you want to torque these down to 21 Newton meters. And on these pinch bolts, you want to go back and forth until they're both at 21. Once I got the forks on, I'm going to go ahead and put the stabilizer back on. Before I torque these, I'm going to put the front wheel on and torque the axle so that the axle will be held 90 degrees to the center line of the forks. Be sure and grease your axle before you reinstall it. And don't forget your spacers. This gets torqued to
45 Newton meters.
While we're at it, we're going to go ahead and torque this pinch bolt. It gets 23 Newton meters. Torque these stabilizer bolts to 21 Newton meters. Don't forget your brake line bracket. Go ahead and put a little bit of medium strength Loctite on these brake caliper bolts. These get torqued to 41 Newton meters. Don't forget to pop that cable back in there and that little retainer. Go ahead and put the sensor back in. I did put a little drop of medium strength Loctite on there. This gets torqued to 9 Newton meters. There we go, all done. Ready to go out and hit some sick jumps on this thing. Okay, maybe not this thing, but new fork seals and ready to ride. Thank you all for watching. If you learned something, go ahead and click that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, go ahead and subscribe and click that bell icon so you don't miss any of our new videos.